You're listening to What She Said with me, Candace Sampson, and this is your weekly reminder to take up big space in life, laugh loudly, absorb new knowledge, and continue to grow and expand. What She Said is your space for the big conversations that matter and the little joys that make life sweeter. This is where empowerment meets self-care and mansplaining has no seat at the table. So grab a coffee, get comfy, and let's jump into it because life's too short not to embrace the good stuff while we tackle the tough stuff.
And so being able to be that role model and show up and show them that you can truly be anything, that to me is the ultimate responsibility that I had as a role model. And I still carry that belief with me. I feel like I show up in the world with that belief.
That was Dr. Chika Oriuwa, and what a role model she is. Doctor, poet, Barbie, mother, humanitarian, she is quite simply a force of nature. Chika's story is one of breaking barriers, shattering expectations, and inspiring change in ways that few can imagine. An accomplished physician and nationally ranked spoken word poet, she's a thought leader whose work cuts across disciplines, touching hearts and minds with her authenticity and purpose. Chika made history as the first Black woman to be named sole valedictorian at the University of Toronto's medical school, a moment that marked not just a personal milestone, but a turning point for representation in healthcare. Since then, she has become a vocal advocate for addressing inequities in medicine, confronting systemic discrimination, and creating a more inclusive and compassionate healthcare system. Her work as a psychiatry resident at the University of Toronto reflects her passion for understanding the human experience and driving meaningful change. But Chika's talents don't stop at medicine. As a celebrated poet, she's mastered the art of storytelling, using her words to connect, heal, and empower. Her new memoir, Unlike the Rest, pulls back the curtain on her deeply personal journey, offering a moving account of what it means to persevere in the face of adversity, to advocate for change, and to find one's voice. It's a story that will inspire anyone who's ever felt out of place or struggled to belong. She's been recognized as one of Time magazine's next generational leaders and Maclean's Power 50, and even had a Barbie doll made in her likeness to honor her contributions as a frontline healthcare worker. Through it all, Chika remains deeply committed to paving the way for others, showing young Black girls and women that they too can achieve greatness. Today, Chika joins me to talk about her remarkable journey, her advocacy, her creative pursuits, and her vision for a better, more inclusive future. She's a trailblazer, a storyteller, and a leader who embodies what it means to show up fully in every space she occupies. Let's hear what she said. Well, the last time you were here, we were discussing the Barbie doll that was made in your likeness, which I loved. And so your memoir, Unlike the Rest, is deeply personal. So can you share what inspired you to write this book and why now felt like the right time to share your story?
So what's really interesting is that when I was in my third year of medical school, I was actually approached by an editor at HarperCollins who was my first editor with this book. And he had heard my story and read a few of my articles, listened to a bit of my poetry, and he thought I would be a brilliant writer for a memoir. And I'd always wanted to write a book ever since I was a little girl, but I always thought it was going to be a piece of fiction and not nonfiction, and especially not a story about my life, but being someone who has just been a lifetime lover and admirer of words and language, it was only natural that I would take up this offer and did so incredibly happily. And with respect to the timing, so I've been writing this book over the course of the last 3 years of my maternity leave. And it felt like it was the perfect time to finally bring it to life because I felt like there was this natural bookending of this chapter of my life, no pun intended, having finished medical school and now being in residency. And it felt like it was an opportunity for me to look back on reflection in what was such a critical time in my life, but also being able to create something that I can not only give to my children, which is the story of my life and how rare of an opportunity is that, but to also be able to give it out into the world for individuals, especially the younger generations who are looking for something that is accessible, tangible, and just a body of work that can be a piece of advice for how to navigate this world.
You were the only Black student in your entire medical school class. What was that experience like, and how did it shape your approach to medicine and advocacy?
So, in a nutshell, and I do talk about this much more in depth within my book, but in a nutshell, that experience for me was incredibly impactful. It is this really complex web of emotions in which being in that unique position definitely spirited me towards this cause of advocacy to really address equity within the medical institutions. It opened up this beautiful door of advocacy and other kinds of exploration for artistic expression as well. However, it was an incredibly challenging time in my life, navigating the circumstance where I'm juggling such an intense academic load as a medical student, but also concurrently pursuing my master's of science in healthcare systems and innovations. And so trying to juggle all of these competing demands while being in this situation that at times felt like it was a direct challenge to my mental health was something that was incredibly challenging. And of course, needing to confront different kinds of micro and macro aggressions, both being a woman in medicine, but also being a Black woman in medicine. It was just a very interesting experience and one that I explore much more intimately within my book, unlike the rest.
And your book touches on the pressure you faced, not only from your studies, but from your family and yourself. And so how did you balance these high expectations with the struggles of systemic racism in your journey?
So it was really, really daunting at times, the amount of pressure that I was under, both internally, just intrinsically having this pressure on me to perform well in medical school, but also having the pressure, from my family, which is well-intentioned to support me, but for me to reach a certain level of excellence. But while doing so, while meeting some of the more corrosive forces of, systemic discrimination. And so for me, what kept me well and what kept me pushing and moving forward was ensuring that I was able to vulnerably lean on the networks of support that I had. And I had a brilliant community of support at the University of Toronto. I had excellent mentors, and I want to name them because they deserve to be celebrated at this moment as well. Dr. Onyi Noram, Dr. Lisa Robinson, who's now the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine at Temerity Medicine, and Dr. Pierre Bryden. And I speak about these incredible women who are, two of them are Black and one of them is white, Dr. Pierre Bryden. And I think they really illustrate for me the importance of support and network coming in different forms and shapes, but nevertheless being so incredibly impactful. And so I thank so much of my support network, including these women, but also my friends and family. They have really supported me throughout this journey and kept me moving forward.
One of the most moving aspects and a little bit surprising to me of your story is how you used spoken word poetry to cope with the pressure of medical school. Can you share more about how that creative outlet helped you during these difficult times?
So poetry comes as natural to me as breathing. And what's interesting is that when I write poetry, I actually feel like more of a conduit or a channel than an actual writer, because sometimes these stanzas will just come into my head in complete form and I just have to grab, my journal or grab my phone and jot it out, almost like if I don't do it immediately, it's just going to vanish. And so that's how most of my poems have actually come into fruition. It just kind of pops into my mind, and the stanzas are completed with cadence and even the ways that I would perform it artistically and theatrically on the stage. And so when I was going through medical school, I just had so many experiences when it felt like the emotions were so high and sometimes my morale was quite low. And naturally, my mind would just kind of do its thing in a very self-protective and therapeutic way. And the poetry would just flow out of me. And that was not only a way for me to cope and process the experiences that I was having, but it was also a way for me to advocate. And so taking my poetry and giving life to it on the stage and in the news and media in different ways was really just the most organic way for me to show up in the world.
Come on a journey like no other, where you will discover many roads that will lead you to a happier, healthier, and more stress-free life. And the beauty is, you don't need any vacation time for this adventure. The journey will come to you. Join Avery Rich on your very own journey into yoga. Along the way, she will demystify yoga poses and guide you into a yoga posture or short sequence, all in less than 15 minutes. You have nothing to lose but stress. The Journey into Yoga podcast. It's not for people who like yoga, it's for people who don't like yoga. Follow or subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or at averyrich.com.
Hi, I'm Steve Yerko.
And I'm Tara Sands. Now available from Maji Media is our new podcast, 4Kids Flashback. 4Kids is the company who brought you the English dub of Pokémon in the late 90s and so many other shows like Yu-Gi-Oh!, Shaman King, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Kirby, the infamous One Piece dub, and so many more.
We'll be talking to the people who worked at 4Kids. Actors, directors, writers, editors, producers, engineers, you get the point. And hopefully get the answers to questions both you and I have about the company.
I actually worked there as a voice actor on some of the shows.
And I was a kid watching the shows and remember way more than Tara does.
And thank God for that. Steve is actually a professional storyboard artist, which gives some really unique insights into anime and animation. Subscribe today wherever you get your podcasts. That's the number 4 Kids Flashback.
You've been recognized with incredible honors, including having a Barbie made in your likeness. How does it feel to be a role model for young Black girls and women, both in medicine and beyond?
To me, it's so incredibly important. I mean, representation, we cannot overstate the importance of representation. But what I think is really beautiful when I think of the role model opportunity for all little girls is that, as women, but especially as little girls as young as 5 years old, we already have self-limiting beliefs as to what it is that we can do in this world. And so being able to be that role model and show up and show them that you can truly be anything, that to me is the ultimate responsibility that I had as a role model. And I still carry that belief with me. I feel like I show up in the world with that belief as someone who is now a mother. When I was originally doing the Barbie campaign, I was 5 months pregnant with my son. And I now have 2 beautiful little kids. My son Eze is 3. My daughter Nkiru is 15 months. And so being able to look at them and truly live out that inspiration as a mother, as a doctor, as a public speaker, as a poet, and now as a published author, I think it just demonstrates through this campaign, especially with Barbie, that we can truly do anything. And what a beautiful thing that is.
In your memoir, you mentioned the risks of speaking up in a field where silence can sometimes feel safer. What advice would you give to others who may feel hesitant to advocate for change in their own industries?
What I would say is that, what I have learned is that never underestimate the power of your voice. And even if it is as loud as a roar or as quiet as a whisper, use your voice, because you can advocate for yourself, you can advocate for your peer, or you can advocate for an entire community. And you'll never know the power of your voice unless you use it. And so that is what I would say to someone who is contemplating whether or not to speak up. And, silence, of course, can be incredibly protective for some individuals. But I found that for myself, my silence didn't necessarily protect me in the ways I thought that it would. And that speaks, very much to the quote by Audre Lorde, "Your silence will not protect you." And I know that for me, that was definitely the case.
As someone who's been both a doctor and an advocate for systemic change, what do you believe are the most pressing issues we need to address in healthcare to make it more inclusive?
I will say this from an incredibly biased standpoint as someone who is a psychiatry resident, but I think we cannot overlook the real impact of mental health in our community, in our world right now. When we're thinking about some of the foremost causes of disability in our world, it really does tie back to mental health and mental wellness. And I'm so proud of the advances that we have made in healthcare and beyond to actually acknowledge mental well-being, especially since the pandemic and us coming out of the pandemic. I think there's been a lot of focus on mental wellness, but I do think that the conversations need to continue to be as rich, need to continue to be as impassioned for us to make real headway. And that also, includes in medical school, the way that we talk about the specialty of psychiatry, the way that we want to prop it up and really encourage medical students to go into it, because there is such a dearth of psychiatrists in our communities, especially psychiatrists of color. And so it's so incredibly important to try and uplift individuals who are doing the work in this field.
What's next for you in terms of advocacy, and how can listeners support the work that you're doing?
So what's next for me? I mean, it's a big question. I feel like I have so many big dreams. I am a dreamer. And of course, I want to go back and I will go back and finish my residency. I have quite a few years left, but I plan to specialize in neuropsychiatry and maybe even forensic neuropsychiatry. I find it so incredibly fascinating. I'm really passionate about that. I have this book, and God willing, I'll have another book, and I'm really excited to continue writing because, like I said, it's as natural to me as breathing. Of course, being a mom is my number one job, and it's the most important thing I'll ever do. But with respect, particularly to my advocacy, I think continuing to do the work that I do through public speaking, especially going into different spaces and places and talking about the importance of human connection, the importance of authentic leadership. That is how I'm really excited to show up in the world right now. And of course, continuing to be a representation of the endless abilities and the endless brilliance of, Black women in the Black community, and being a role model for that and a representation of that. So that's what I'm really excited about right now. And in terms of how I can be supported, I think first and foremost, of course, is being able to support the book, unlike the rest of Doctor's story. And if one has the capacity to purchase it, of course, that would be so incredibly appreciated, and I'm endlessly grateful. But also, libraries are an incredible resource. Even going into your local library and asking them to order it so that you can, lend it out and borrow it and read it and return it. That is also a brilliant way to support them, to support the message as well. And so in any capacity, being able to support the book would be incredibly grateful.
All right, fantastic. Do you have a website and social channels where people can keep up with you as well?
Absolutely. So my website is www.drchikaoriuwa.com. That's DrChikaOriuwa.com. And that's a mouthful.
Thank you, because I was struggling with this in the beginning.
It's a lot of letters. And then as for my social channels, it's at Dr. Chika Oriuwa. So same thing, DrChikaOriuwa.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chika. It was just a delight having you back on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been so wonderful chatting with you, and I can't wait to be back on in the future.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to share it with someone who'd love it too. And don't forget to hit subscribe to What She Said with me, Candace Sampson, on your favorite podcast app. It's the easiest way to stay connected. Want more? Sign up for my newsletter at whatshesaidtalk.com to get all the latest updates, and let's keep the conversation going on social. You can find What She Said on Facebook and Instagram, and you'll find me on Threads, TikTok, and Blue Sky at Candace Said. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.
What do you do? How did you do it? And what will you do next? Questions we ask people every single day of the week. So I decided to turn it into a podcast. Do, Did, Will, the Story of People podcast asks those very questions to some of the most interesting people in the world. Actors, Athletes, doctors, lawyers, servicemen and women, you name it, we cover all walks of life to get to the core of what they do, how they did it, and what they'll do next. Do Did Will, the Story of People podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, and at soundoff.network.
That jingling sound is not Santa's reindeer. That's pocket change. To remind you that every nickel, dime, quarter, loonie, and toonie you donate to Feed Ontario will help support over 1,200 food banks and hunger relief organizations. And more than 1 million family, friends, and neighbors expected to visit food banks in Ontario in the next year. Please, give now at feedontariotogether.ca for the big change your pocket change can make.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.